Well, I guess I have to eat my words. I said I would not be doing a video on Sonic Freeriders, but as usual, the Sonic community was doing its thing and being awesome. And now, thanks to a user that goes by Rayson, we now have Sonic Freeriders playable with a normal controller. You don't need the Kinect anymore, so it's finally a playable video game. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The Sonic community is incredible. There's a lot of cool communities out there for a lot of things, making a lot of cool stuff, but nothing on the level, nothing with the same amount of volume or quality that you see in the Sonic community, man. Who the heck else is gonna take a Kinect game and make it playable on a controller? And this just adds to the already existing suite of awesome Sonic Riders mods that dramatically improve the official games, though this one is probably the most significant improvement of them all. Because like DX and Tournament Edition, they take the original Riders, which is already a good game, and make it even better. Regravitified takes a not very good game and makes it good, but this mod takes a game that's not even playable and makes it something that many people for the first time have gotten the chance to experience. In terms of the gap of quality and how much this improves the game, this is number one for sure. I mean, this is my first time playing Sonic Freeriders. This was like one of the only Sonic games that I've never played before because I didn't get a Kinect and I don't frickin' care. And even if you do get one to play the game, the Kinect is so trash that it doesn't even work correctly most of the time. We've all seen some Call Me Johnny's video on this game. So yeah, I cannot heap enough praise onto the people behind this mod. This is a game that I've been interested in for so very long, and now I've finally gotten the chance to play it. And now that I have gotten the chance to play it, I want to critique Sonic Freeriders like I would any other Sonic game. In a way, this is kind of this game's first chance to get, like, actually properly reviewed, because pretty much every existing review prior to this mod was just, the game doesn't work, it sucks. But now we can actually look at the gameplay, the game design, and the features and mechanics, and actually talk about those things, because you can actually engage with them now, so that's pretty cool. That said, going into Freeriders, I wasn't expecting that much, because even if the game can now be played without the Kinect, the game was still designed with the Kinect in mind, so the mechanics here are going to be very leaning towards simplicity and body gestures and that kind of thing. So my expectations going into Freeriders was that this was probably going to be the weakest of the Sonic Riders games. And yeah, I do think it is the weakest of the games, but I do think it is pretty fun. If you've watched my Zero Gravity video, then you'll know in that game I was very upset with how much they took out the mechanics from the original Sonic Riders game and replaced them with things that were much simpler, much shallower, and nowhere near as fun. And sadly, Freeriders is kind of similar, but in some ways, it actually does go a little bit back more to that original Sonic Riders formula, which I'm glad about. All the gravity stuff is gone, and in its place, a number of things have been restored to how they used to be, to some degree. For example, charging in the lead-up to a ramp has been restored. As far as the trick system in the game, we're still nowhere near what the original Riders had, but it's definitely a lot better than Zero Gravity. This time around, of course, you would normally be doing like a bunch of spinning jumps and crap in order to make your character do tricks. So the way that ends up working out in this modded version of the game is it's kind of a combination of charging your jump in the lead up to it and then also doing some kind of input to get your character to do the highest level tricks you can. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how to do X rank tricks consistently. I've done them sometimes, and I really don't know what I'm doing differently that makes me able to do them. What I figured out is that if I hold the right trigger, which allows you to like manually control like where your hands would be, and then flick the right stick up, that makes my character do a trick, and I usually get like an S+ by doing that. But sometimes it also gets me an X rank, and I'm really not sure what makes that happen. I thought maybe it was jumping off the ramp late, but I don't think that's a factor. If somebody knows how to consistently get X ranks, please let me know. Boosting is back. It functions quite differently than it did in the original Sonic Riders, but I'll certainly take this over the gravity dive. Also, something I'm very happy to see is the leveling system from the first Riders is back, which is great. I thought its omission in Zero Gravity and replacement with the whole gear change system was a big step down. Sadly, drifting is still not a thing, but I guess that's understandable because how would you have a drift input on the Kinect when you turn by leaning your body? It'd be really hard to make that work, so I understand why there's no drift here. I'm still not happy about it, but fine. Of course, type shortcuts have returned, but they function a little bit differently than the other Riders games in some pleasantly surprising ways, for the most part, except for flight. Flight has been reduced a little bit. In the previous games, when you were flying, you could fully control the direction you were going to be flying in. Now, because it uses Kinect gesture motions, is like the design of it, all you can do is control up and down. You can't control left or right at all, which is a little unfortunate, but whatever. What is nice, however, is they've actually improved grinding for the speed characters. Before, it was just like an automated thing that you would just do, but now, because, you know, we need Kinect body gesture things, you have to balance on the rails now, and if you successfully balance, then you'll go faster, which is like, hell yeah, dude! I've always thought that balancing was a great mechanic for rail grinding, and I don't like that they took it out of the main Sonic games, and now adding it here to Sonic Riders, I'm all about it. And with power formation stuff, they've done something kind of fun. Again, makes sense for the Kinect. Now, instead of just automatically punching when you encounter something that you can break in power formation, you have to manually throw a punch to destroy the thing. And they also shoot out like these little projectiles just to give it a little bit more of a forgiving range, which is understandable. But I don't know, I kind of prefer having to, like, manually punch things so there's a bit of timing to it, because in the previous Riders games, you didn't really do anything as power formation. It just meant that you could go to places that the other formations couldn't. Now there's a little bit more gameplay to it, now you can actually mess it up, which I do like. And of course, we also have all the new mechanics introduced in the game, which of course are all designed for Kinect body motion type stuff. For example, one big new thing is the ability to stretch out your arms, which you can use to reach out over to side areas to grab spray paint cans, or you can grab onto certain objects like poles to swing yourself around, or bars that will take you onto different routes for various different kinds of shortcuts and such. You can also duck down, which, you know, on a Kinect you would actually physically crouch down, but here it's just a button that you hold. Which is fine, it functions well enough as a way to have multiple different types of interactions with certain stage hazards, but without body gesture stuff, there's really nothing to any of this. You just see the thing that you need to do, and then you just do it. If there's a thing coming up that you have to duck under, you just duck under it by holding the button. It's very shallow, but, you know, what would you expect for a Kinect game, so I guess it's fine. Another big change for Free Riders that makes a lot of sense considering it's a Kinect game is there's been a much greater emphasis placed on items, kind of Mario Kart style, and there have been some items in the previous Riders games they would occasionally get from capsules, but it was a very minimal part of the game and they really didn't have that much of an impact, but there's a much greater focus on them here. Now you got a lot more, like, items for attacking the other players and doing things like that, and, you know, this is all to facilitate more motion stuff. You know, you have a thing you can throw forward, or a thing you can bowl to, like, make it roll forward to attack enemies, a thing that you shake in order to get spray paint cans, that kind of stuff. Which, yeah, again, makes perfect sense that you would do that kind of thing for a Kinect game, to have as much gesture motion as you possibly can. But actually using these items, I gotta say, they feel very unimpactful to me. They don't really make that much of a difference in my experience. Which I guess you could think of as a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you want to approach this. Sonic Free Riders, despite being a Kinect game, is still very much a skill-based game, and there's absolutely a lot of ways that a good player can speed themselves up way more than a bad player, so it's nice that they've at least maintained that core energy from the previous Riders games. It's not as intense as it has been in previous games. For example, when you run out of air here, you don't start running and go very slowly or anything like that. But it's still there to a decent degree. This most definitely is still a Sonic Riders game. It does feel like a Sonic Riders game, which is something I'm very happy about, because as we all know, we're never going to get another Sonic Riders game. And thanks to this mod, this is essentially a brand new Sonic Riders game. So that's all good and hunky-dory, but as I said, I do think this is the weakest of the Sonic Riders games for various reasons, but number one above everything else is the controls of this game. At first I was thinking this might just be due to the mod and maybe the way that it applies the motion input to a control stick, but after playing it a little bit more, I've started to realize that I think this game just kind of controls like shit. And I think part of the reason for that is because they're trying to compensate for the fact that this is supposed to be a Kinect game, and so precise control is not exactly something that you're going to have to the same degree you would with a normally controlled game. So they've done some stuff with the way Free Riders functions that I'm not a very big fan of, because it's something that's hard to notice when you're just watching the video, but when you're playing the game, you can feel it. There's kind of like a track that you're forced to follow when you're playing Free Riders. I mean, obviously there's the literal track, but I mean that there's like splines that your characters are forced to go along, and there's like lanes on the track. When you move left in this game, you don't steer left, not really. What you're actually doing is just moving to the lane to your left. And you can tell that if you just like tap left and right a little bit, how you like snap to these specific positions and then straighten back out automatically. These automated tracks can also force you to turn a little bit when there's slight curves in the course. Like here, for example, I didn't do anything when my character turned just there. I was completely neutral on the input, but they just made that slight adjustment on their own. And sometimes these automated slight adjustments can really catch you off guard where you don't want to do that. You want to stay on your straight course, but the game automatically turns you, and then you have to fight against the automation, and it often ends up having me like do things that I don't want to do, and I miss stuff that I have no reason to have missed, and that is very, very annoying to deal with. Eventually, you do kind of get a feel for how to wrangle this and how to make it work, but overall, it's a really bad-feeling control scheme, especially compared to the insanely smooth controls of the original Sonic Riders. Another thing I don't like about this game is that once again, just like in Zero Gravity, while there are type shortcuts, the types are not actually applied to the characters, and I really don't like that. Especially in this game, it feels like there's almost no differences across any of the characters. They're pretty much all identical. All that really matters is your gear and your chosen gear parts. That basically determines everything about how you're going to play. Your character is basically just a cosmetic choice. I have noticed that maybe characters are put into like different weight types or something like that, and maybe some character types accelerate faster than others, but it's extremely minor. And yeah, gear parts, that's another thing that they've introduced in this game, which in theory, on paper, I kind of like the idea, but I don't at all like how it actually ends up working in the game. So the way it works is you pick your gear, and of course you have different gears with different stats and abilities, which I'm going to come back to because that's also a problem. And after picking your gear, you get to pick 2 gear parts to customize it, and these can be various different things: more acceleration, more air, more speeds from boosting, more tricks, the ability to steal spray cans from other racers if you collide with them, things like that. And when you're in the race, you can change your stance to change which of your 2 gear parts selected is the one currently active. And again, I could see why they did this. When you're actually playing on the Kinect, you would have to physically turn your body into different orientations to activate these different modes. But when you're playing on a controller, it's just a button to switch between these 2 things. But here's the problem with this whole system. In addition to just various different stat buffs, you also have the type abilities assigned to these gear parts, and type shortcuts are so insanely powerful that you're always going to want at least one type selected, which means that this potentially interesting system of swapping back and forth between these 2 different buffs to suit the situation, what it actually turns into is right before a type shortcut, you switch to your type, take the shortcut, and then immediately after it, you switch back to your other mode. Or in the case of just taking 2 type shortcuts, you just switch to that type right before the shortcut, and it's not interesting at all. There's nothing to think about. It is incredibly underwhelming, unfortunately, because I do think this system has some potential. If you didn't have the types in here and it was instead assigned to the characters, then you would have 2 gear parts that you would actually consider what's valuable, what do you want to use, what works well with your gear, what's good for the current track, all that. But in the current system, it just all relies on the type stuff, and that completely fucks up the entire thing. And when it comes to the gears themselves, as always, you have various different gears with various different stats and abilities, but in all of the vanilla Sonic Riders games, a lot of the gears are nowhere near as varied or interesting or cool as you would like, and Free Riders is probably the worst in this department because there is an objectively best gear, the one that I've been using through pretty much all of this footage, the High Booster. This gear completely trounces every other gear by a country mile. It's not even remotely close. Because the thing about the boost system in Free Riders is that when you boost, you get that big burst of speed, but then you maintain that speed for a good couple of seconds before you start slowing down. And even that, the slowing down takes a while, so you get to maintain that speed pretty well. Which means that all that really matters is your boost speed. If you can properly manage your air and boost at the right moments when you're going to get the most bang for your buck, the High Booster completely demolishes every other gear in the game. It's not even close. Supersonic is also a thing in this game too, like all the previous Riders games, but he kinda sucks, honestly. He's no longer Omni-type, and the, boost state that you can enter with him is slower than the speed you can achieve with the High Booster, so he's just terrible. And come on, man, Supersonic should never be terrible. I'd rather have an OP busted as fuck Supersonic than one that doesn't do fucking anything. And by the way, speaking of balance issues, the tracks themselves are horribly unbalanced with the type shortcuts. Pretty much every single track, there is one type that completely destroys the other 2 types in terms of how powerful its shortcuts are. Which is not something particularly new for Sonic Riders. The other games had similar problems. I'm just kind of used to playing the competitive mods that are much, much more well-balanced, so coming back to this is kind of bleh. Another thing I don't like, coming from the competitive mods, is something that's really started to annoy me with Sonic games, not just Free Riders, not just the Riders games, but just Sonic games in general. Dash panels slowing you down is the stupidest goddamn thing in the world. As I said, High Booster gives you a ton of speed that you can maintain in this game, but then you hit a dash panel and it slows you down to way lower than you were going previously. Which means a lot of the time you want to avoid dash panels, which, they're clearly supposed to be things that you intentionally go for a speed boost, but they don't actually speed you up, and this whole fucking thing is just goddamn stupid. Dash panels really need to be reworked so that way they are additive to your current speed instead of setting your speed to a single value, like the already existing competitive mods for the other Riders games. So with all these problems, I gotta say Sonic Free Riders is a bit unfortunate, though not necessarily disappointing. I was kind of expecting issues like this going into the game, and yeah, it turns out that this game has quite a number of problems with how it's designed, unfortunately. But it's still quite a fun game. Not the most fun in the world, to be honest. Eventually, I did start to get a little bored with the gameplay here, but certainly not anything that I would call bad. I would say it's definitely worth checking out if you're a Sonic Riders fan. And one thing I really gotta give them credit for is that this may be a Kinect game, but it is absolutely a full Sonic Riders game. They did not skimp with this, except maybe the story mode, how it has, no cutscenes and it just uses these shitty VN sequences. But other than that, everything that you would want in a Riders game is here. There's a bunch of tracks. It even still has the thing where there's kind of zones in the game, and there's 2 tracks per, environment type. There's a bunch of different modes you can play, which most of them I don't find to be particularly good, but they're there, so, lots of content to check out at the very least. The only real shortcoming here, in my opinion, is the severe lack of Sega stuff here. We don't have any other Sega guest characters, knights and stuff like that. And we don't have those super fun Sega tracks with a bunch of Sega franchises all over the place. Those are super cool. Everybody loved those tracks. Why didn't you do that in this game? Though what they do have is a recreation of Metal City from the first Riders game, which that's pretty cool, and it's not just a one-to-one remake. They have modified the track and adapted it to better fit the mechanics of Sonic Free Riders, and the secondary track in Metal City is not just Night Chase from the first game, it's actually an entirely new track, so that's kind of cool. I also do want to give some credit to the music. I never really have listened to the Free Riders soundtrack very much before, but it's pretty good, not bad at all. I would say one thing that's a little weird personal niggle with this game is the character models are a little off-putting to me, because when I think Sonic Riders, I think those big, lanky character models that have, like, the stretched-out proportions and they get, like, thicker towards the ends of their wrists and ankles and stuff. The specific way that the Riders games look was very different than anything else in Sonic, and it was kind of cool. But this is when they started to go all generic and boring with Sonic art styles, and everything uses these types of modern Sonic models, which I'm personally just in general not a big fan of. But who knows, maybe one day that'll change, because with the release of this patch, interest in Sonic Free Riders has skyrocketed, and already there's been a mod created to allow you to use the Japanese voices, which I've been using here, or you can even use the 4Kids English cast if you prefer the authentic original Sonic Riders voice actors. So maybe at some point someone can swap out all these character models for the ones from the previous Riders games. And I think the modding potential of this game now is the thing I'm most excited about. Like, if we could get a competitive mod for Sonic Free Riders similar to the ones that exist for the other Riders games, I think this game could really become something really, really cool. You know, make some adjustments, get rid of the weird, like, automated lanes and just have traditional turning. There is a gear in this game that does have drifting built into it, so you could just, like, regravitify, take that, and make drifting into a universal mechanic again. Once again, reapply types to the characters instead of being gear parts, rebalance the gear parts, rebalance the gears, rebalance the type shortcuts, probably speed up the game also. I feel like the tracks are a little stretched out and long here. Races can go for quite a bit. I personally feel they might work better with just 2 laps instead of 3, considering how long they are, but whatever. Make the dash panels additive to your speed instead of setting it to a specific value. If you did all of that, I think this game could be really, really cool and really, really fun. And considering it's happened for all the other Sonic Riders games and how awesome the Sonic community is, that might not necessarily be a pipe dream. For all I know, someone is already working on it. But until then, this is the Sonic Free Riders we have, and overall I would say it's an okay game. Definitely the weakest of the Riders games in my opinion, especially compared to the competitive mods that exist. But still a decently fun game, and more than anything, I'm still kind of just excited and blown away by the fact that I got to play this game. This is a game I've been interested in for so long, and I thought I'd never have the chance to really play it, and now I finally did, and just that in and of itself is incredibly awesome. So once again, thank you to Rayson and all the people that helped them out with the mod. If it wasn't for you guys, nobody would be able to play this game. And anything cool that may happen with the future of Sonic Free Riders is all thanks to you guys. So major props to everyone that contributed to this patch, major props to just the Sonic community in general and how awesome everybody is. As usual, I put a link in the description to my spreadsheet of recommended Sonic mods, and I've added things for Sonic Free Riders, both the No Connect patch as well as a couple of voice packs for if you want Japanese or the 4Kids actors. Normally, I wouldn't really care about the English cast, I always go for Japanese, but for those who do prefer English, it just feels right to use the 4Kids cast for a Sonic Riders game, doesn't it? Plus, have you heard Jet's new English voice actor? It's kinda terrible. Anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed. There's links to my Patreon and Coffee in the description if you'd like to support me. I'll see you next time.